At issue this Sunday, Boston Mayor Michelle Wu. So much to talk about: her property tax proposal, her vision for White Stadium, her re-election campaign, and her growing family.
We'll ask the mayor about all of these issues, as well as her concerns about the return of Trump. At Issue starts now.
Good Sunday morning to you, and welcome to another edition of At Issue. I'm Corey Smith.
And I'm Sue O'Connell. Mayor Michelle Wu is here. We've got a ton of topics to press her on, starting with whether homeowners in Boston should expect a property tax increase.
First, we start with a quick look back at what was at issue over the past week.
President Biden has used the power of the Oval Office to pardon his son, Hunter.
Yeah, so the surprise decision is an about-face to earlier public promises to accept the court's decision on his cases.
Trump has announced his pick for FBI Director Kash Patel. If you don't know who that is, well, Patel is a former public defender and federal prosecutor, but sparked controversy after leaving the White House for promoting the claim that the 2020 election was stolen. He's also promoted pills that he said would reverse the effects of the COVID vaccine.
Opposition parties in South Korea have submitted a bill to impeach President Yoon Suk Yeol. Now, he attempted to impose martial law on the democratic country, only to back down from that decision hours later in a standoff with Parliament.
We've just learned Boston City Councilor Tanya Fernandez Anderson was taken into custody early this morning. The FBI and U.S. Attorney's Office both announcing that arrest of the city councilor this morning on federal public corruption charges.
No shortage of issues in the city of Boston. They're bubbling up right now, so joining us to talk about them is Boston Mayor Michelle Wu. Thanks so much for coming in on At Issue.
It's great to be with you.
Good to see you again. All right, let's start with your property tax proposal. We know it's a complicated issue. You're trying to avoid a tax hike for residents. You reached a compromise of sorts with business leaders and lawmakers. You made it through the city council. You made it through the House of Representatives. But a few days ago, State Senator Rick Collins, South Boston, delayed a vote, saying they needed more time to digest the information and the city's financial situation. Has your office been sharing that information with lawmakers all this time? Have you had a chance to speak with the senator about moving this forward?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is such an important issue because it touches every single resident, whether you are a homeowner directly paying your taxes or a renter getting that absorbed through your lease. And we've been at this for 8 months now through public legislative processes, more than 5 months at the State House directly, multiple hearings before the joint Senate and House committee, multiple briefings available, providing any information that we could as soon as we had it. And very recently, the Department of Revenue also certified the final valuations for the city's property rolls. And so that information has been shared as well. And so it's surprising to see continued delay on this. We have been trying to reach out and provide whatever information to anyone possible. We finally did have a briefing with the senator just a couple days ago. It was the first agreement that he had to come in and learn a little bit more, and we will continue to provide information, but the days and hours are ticking away now.
If Bostonians end up with a tax hike for Christmas, they're going to look for somebody to blame. I know you don't want to throw anybody under the bus, but what has been the sticking point? Why is this not getting done?
To be honest, I'm not really sure. We have, again, had a very thorough, long process that has resulted in 2 times of approvals through the City Council and the House of Representatives. We were asked and very grateful to come to the table with the Senate President and the Boston Senators, along with 4 leaders of business groups, and we were instructed to strike a compromise deal and make sure that those impacted stakeholders would be comfortable. We reached that deal. And since then, it's been another several months that we are awaiting action on this. And so we'll continue to provide any possible information, appreciate the due diligence, appreciate the thorough work, especially as everyone is getting busy in the holiday season. But those bills will have to be finalized very soon.
As it stands today, do you think this is ultimately going to pass? And if it doesn't, that tax hike along with the city's budget, is that going to make it hard fiscally for the city of Boston and its residents?
So we're always trying to plan for the worst case scenarios, and we know that times are tough all around. This is an incredibly impactful piece of legislation because a 21% hike bill to bill on residents, even if that averages out to half that over the year, it still means that seniors are trying to come up with that additional money right when utility costs and heating costs are going up. It means people are having to struggle on top of a very expensive and increasingly out of reach housing market in general. Taxes in Boston had been going up at a very significant rate over the last several years, and it's really a common sense compromise tool that we have come to a consensus with business community leaders, with various other entities in government. And so we're just asking to honor the results of that goal that was set, that we needed to reach compromise. We have done so, and we really have approached this whole process in good faith and want to see our residents protected.
All right, let's look over to the Boston City Council. We talked about it, saw it up at the top of the show. Back in the headlines again, this time not for good reasons. Councilor Tanya Fernandez Anderson, she's my city councilor, and in my neighborhood, folks have been asking what the heck is going on with the investigation. There's a federal investigation, we understand. Councilor Ed Flynn told our Matt Pritchard, quote, "It will be challenging in the next year because of this." Do you share that view, and do you know what's going on?
I don't have any information on this situation, so I'm not going to speculate and would just urge everyone to let the facts unfold. We have been working to make sure that from the administration side and on the council side, we're getting things done for residents. I know it always is important for community members to also feel a sense of trust in terms of how they are being represented. And so that is for each district and for each voter to decide on their own. But I would suggest that whether it's the property tax proposal or other measures that we put forward, we have been able to see progress moving things through on the administration side in partnership with the council overall.
Have you spoken with Councilmember Anderson?
I have not had a chance to.
Okay.
All right, well, since you were last here, there was an election. I don't know if you were aware of it. We now have President-elect Trump heading back to the White House, and his borders are Tom Homan. He's been criticizing you, and especially after you restated Boston's policy of refusing to help the feds if they wanted to deport undocumented immigrants unless there were criminal warrants. I imagine that's the law that you're following. It's not something that you're just making up. He has threatened you with arrest and other mayors with arrest if you don't comply with his wishes. What do you think is going to happen at the end of January and into February when Trump takes office? And are you worried? Are you worried you're going to get arrested? Do you want a pardon from President Biden in advance, like I have urged? What do you think is going to happen?
We're all watching this very carefully. In Boston, it's been settled law for the last 10 years, and we call it the Trust Act. It's well established, and it was passed in 2014, not only with the support of community members and governmental leaders, on elected officials, et cetera, but also with full support of law enforcement, because our department knows that in order to achieve the progress we have on public safety, to have the lowest crime rates in the country, to be at historic lows for gun violence and other statistics in Boston's history, it has depended on trust with the community. And if all of a sudden you have community members or a certain subsect of the community feeling like it's not safe for them to call 911 when they need help, share information, or report a crime when they have information, that affects everyone's safety across our community. So it's actually also been put out as the recommended policy by the Major Chiefs Association, which represents all of the big city police departments at their leadership level, where they have stated as recently as 2019 that the job of local law enforcement is to protect everyone in their community, regardless of immigration status. The job of the federal government may be different, but it is not the role of local officers to do the federal government's job. And so the lines are what they are. We have codified that in Boston, and we know this is the best way to keep people safe. There's been a little bit of a twisting of the facts, or trying to suggest that if we are focused on our work at the local level in public safety, that is shielding those who are committing crimes, or somehow providing a loophole for immigrants who are, causing harm in the community to have protection. That couldn't be further from the truth. We treat every instance of criminal activity or violence or harm the same way, with the same accountability and relentless focus on bringing justice to the victims and to those who have been impacted. But that doesn't mean that we are going to do the work of immigration or detention at the federal level, because we know how to keep our communities safe best here.
So this notion of potential retribution for local governments not following what a Trump administration wants. Also extends to things like climate change, money potentially being clawed back from some of the initiatives that President Biden and Congress have passed if you don't comply with whatever the Trump administration wants. Is that a real concern for you? And have you spoken with members of the congressional delegation about what happens if the president says, take money from Massachusetts because they're not doing something that I want, which ultimately trickles down to the city of Boston?
We have been having those conversations, and a couple weeks ago I was at the White House also meeting with Biden administration officials on how to wrap up some of the final steps on the grants that we have been allocated. Boston and Massachusetts have been remarkably successful at obtaining support from the federal government over the last several years. We have had somewhere in the range of $90 million from on climate issues that have been granted through federal funds and competitive grants, another $40 million through infrastructure, the bipartisan infrastructure law, and then another $500 to $600 million through partnership applications that involve a coalition of organizations, whether it's community colleges or nonprofit groups, in partnership with the city. The goal now is to ensure that all of those are codified in law. The steps are you win the grant, you earn the grant, they make the announcement, and then they settle the terms in a contract that is legally binding. And so we've now gone through, there's still a small number of contracts that we are getting into, a small number of grants that we're getting into final contract form with the existing or the outgoing administration. And then what happens to those that are to be awarded in the future or have not yet gone out the door, that is unsettled. But we always operate within the letter of the law at the city level, and we know that we stand on solid ground when it comes to protecting what we have and working to make sure that we are fully codified with those contracts.
Your family's welcoming a new member soon. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Folks know you're expecting a baby. You're running for re-election. Big year next year coming up.
Very busy.
Are you going to, is the plan to not take parental leave? Are you going to take parental leave? You got parental leave expanded for city employees. What's your plan?
Yeah, it's first of all so important that we are providing these guarantees for working families. It's a huge barrier, and I've heard so many stories from parents and caregivers around the city, and so I've been very proud that when I was on the council, one of my first acts in terms of legislation was to officially give Boston paid parental leave for city workers as one of the first cities to do so.
You also made national headlines by bringing your baby to the city council meeting, which you look back on it, you're like, wow.
We needed to get paid leave in place.
Yeah.
And then now, in my actually first year as mayor, we were able to dramatically expand that through collective bargaining. And so 90% plus of our city workers finally have paid parental leave. You know, the job of mayor is quite unique, and the role is to be available for decisions whenever decisions need to be made. I will certainly be off my feet and recovering and at home, but in touch with my team. And I think Jane Swift has referred to it as working leave in the past, but being on hand, being available, and also making sure that I'm doing what I need to do to recover and help our family settle.
All right, let's stick with talking about kids. Moving to BPS, you guys introduced a new app supposed to improve school bus performance. First day of class, 2/3 of buses were late. NBC Boston investigators follow it up around Halloween time, found a majority of days during the current school year scored worse in on-time performance compared to last year. Are things improving over the last few weeks? Obviously, we're heading to the holiday break, but are you satisfied with where things are with the bus performance and with this app as well?
I'm not satisfied until we know that every single student is not missing a minute of learning time. I have 2 kids in our public schools, and getting a start to the day that feels unsettled because they're running in late, that has an impact that ripples all throughout the day. They might miss breakfast at school and this and that. So that is the ultimate goal of 100% on time every single day. What we know is that it had been a little bit of a rocky start in implementing new technology, but we believe that this was the only way to actually see the types of improvements that could close the rest of the way in the gaps to who was going to school on time and who wasn't. For the last 30 years, bus routes have been run using clipboards and printed out paper maps and not knowing or tracking which students were getting on and off the bus on any given day. And so you'd hear and see that buses might be half empty going through our neighborhoods because some students weren't using the bus at all, but there was no way to prove or verify who should be removed from a route or how the routes should be maybe changed to make the most sense. So now for the first time, There is an app that allows family members and parents to see exactly where their child is and what the estimated pickup and drop-off time will be. It's very similar to Uber. They'll give you the estimated time. It's quite accurate. We've heard great things from families saying, this finally gives us peace of mind. There have been some tweaks that needed to be made as well. It also incorporates real-time GPS data for traffic for the very first time. And so you have routes shifting when we know on every single day this is a backed up spot. There's a lot of traffic. They'll incorporate that into the routing. And then most importantly, it tells us where our students are and who is using the bus on any given day. This will allow us for the first time to actually make sure the routes make sense and are the ones that are the most effective to meet our families' needs as well as the districts.
Do you think BPS can reach that 95% on-time performance rate mandated by the state?
So it depends how you count it, but again, 100% is our goal. We had been stuck at about 90% by sort of partway through the year. We are now well back to the same levels of on-time performance for this time of the year last year with the app. But the only way to get the rest of the gap closed is for this kind of adaptive technology to be part of how we do things.
All right, let's talk soccer stadiums. Of course, there's another plan for a new soccer stadium, this one in Everett, for the New England Revolution. They, of course, are owned by the Kraft Group. Shirley Leung wrote in the Boston Globe recently that maybe the two teams could share a stadium, the women's team and the men's team, and that maybe it would be better for everybody. Maybe the Kraft Group could give White Stadium some money and everybody would benefit from it. Is that something you're willing to talk about or consider?
I mean, it's not up to the city, for example, to decide what private sports franchises are going to do in their best interest. What we have heard the whole time from the professional women's soccer team is that they're interested in making an impact beyond just winning the championships or even on the field. They wanted to be involved in a way that would create a huge ripple effect across the entire community. And so locating a professional team with our student athletes in a facility that will then expand hours for community and for our Boston Public School sports teams, this is going to be absolutely transformational. We have been now for over a year really making sure that we're getting all the provisions right. There's been more than 50 public meetings, thousands of comments from residents who have helped reshape the project and incorporated changes that now make it an extremely strong proposal that I believe is what is in the best interest of our entire community. Now, I've also heard, we actually just had some mayors from other cities in town over the last week, and several of them have had new stadium projects. We've been talking about it. There is a growing feeling that I'm hearing from all across the country that women's sports teams also deserve their very own stadium. They can take up the space. They have the interest and the attendance at games, and it also makes sure that there's a standalone focus on some of the best athletes in the world who don't need to necessarily be sharing or playing second fiddle in a space. That is up to the teams, but we've been having great conversations and look to finalize all this very soon. What
is your relationship like now with the folks who were opposed to the White Stadium renovation? Have you spoken to them since this thing was sort of finalized?
Yeah, I mean, there are some complications because there's still active litigation. The city is, I think, headed towards the next step, and that will be a March court date. We have worked to try to address every bit of concerns, and through the public process have really made many. I mean, I've never seen in my 10 plus years in city government a project that has been so responsive to all of the community needs around parking, transportation, access, giving back of open space and expanding accessible parkland. So I really believe that many of the concerns, the rightful, valid concerns that were expressed at the beginning, have led to improvements in this project.
Is there a demolition date yet?
It should be coming very soon. The next milestone is to formalize and sign the lease, and then we would get going.
We mentioned the Kraft Group. Josh Kraft might run against you for this mayoral race. Your thoughts on him? How do you think that matchup could pan out?
I am loving the chance to make sure that city government and Boston in particular can be a showcase for how we do things around the country. That's not just in the policies and the work that we're doing, but also in how we do politics. And we're a democracy, so anyone who feels they know the community well enough and are ready to contribute should find a way to contribute. It is quite an intensive endeavor, and I'm eager to make sure that we're highlighting all the work that's happening and all the work that is to come.
Have you met him? I know, do you spend any time with him at all, run into him at these events?
Certainly run in, yes. Had some very brief conversations.
All right, let's talk about BPS Sundays. Of course, we've talked about it a lot. Gives free admission to Boston Public School students and their families to great museums like the MFA, the Children's Museum, Corey's favorite, the Aquarium. It's been expanded. What's the update on that?
Yes, we're thrilled to share that starting in January, the program will not only be expanding in terms of who is eligible. So our pilot started with Boston Public School students and their families in order to really test the financial constraints of it and work out an arrangement with the institutions of what they could sustainably carry forward. So all of those numbers and data and all that has been crunched. We're now able to welcome every single Boston student, K through 12 in our city, to come for free the first and second Sundays of the month, along with 2 of their family members or visitors or guests or loved ones in their life. We've also added 3 additional institutions to the lineup of which are participating. So it's the Isabel Stewart Gardner Museum, the Museum of African American History, and the John F. Kennedy Presidential Museum and Library. And so we look to keep working on how we can ensure our young people feel at home in every space in the city. It's been a tremendous success so far. Again, just in the pilot phase, more than 44,000 students and their families took part. The Children's Museum tracked some numbers and said more than 40% told them it was their very first time going. The ICA said more than 55% it was their first time ever setting foot in these spaces.
Okay. We've got about 30 seconds left. What are your priorities for next year that folks really need to sort of keep an eye on?
Yeah, we want to keep delivering for quality of life and what our residents need. Housing is the top concern. It is too expensive to live in Boston. We want to make sure that opportunities for young people and families are there, that we keep safety going in our city. We want Boston to be a home for everyone, the safest city, the greenest city, the most family-friendly, and we're doing everything possible to be a leading light across the country as well.
All right. Mary Ruth, thank you so much for being here on That Issue. We appreciate it. Happy holidays to you, the best to you and your growing family to be as well.
All right, up next, the political farewell that also served as a warning to Americans and a farewell of our own. We'll be right back.
Welcome back. You know, this time of year marks the end of legislative sessions and politicians' careers. And last week, we were joined by 2 Massachusetts lawmakers who were stepping away after decades of service.
And in Washington, former Massachusetts Governor Mitt Romney is leaving the Senate and public service, he says, for once and for all. It's hard to believe that he was the Republican presidential nominee before Donald Trump. And in his farewell address to the Senate, Romney warned of those who, quote, tear at our unity, end quote, and urged America and its representatives to uphold the nation's values.
A country's character is a reflection not just of its elected officials, but also of its people. I leave Washington to return to be one among them, and hope to be a voice of unity and virtue. For it is only if the American people merit his benevolence that God will continue to bless America.
Though Romney only served 1 term, he made a unique sort of history. He was the first senator ever who voted to remove a president of his own party, and he did it twice.
Speaking of farewells, we need to offer our own because this is the final edition of At Issue.
Corey and I are still going to cover local, state, and national politics, not only in the newsroom at our desks, but also on the newscasts on NBC 10 Boston. We'll provide the context on all the historical and even some of the mundane and boring news events that come your way.
We covered a lot in our short time together, from landmark events like the NAACP National Convention in Boston, Donald Trump's historic court appearances, and along with our colleague Matt Pritchard, the Democratic and Republican National Conventions from Milwaukee and Chicago.
And of course, we'll continue to give extensive live coverage when major events happen, just not at this time slot or on this program.
Sue and I would like to thank the folks behind the scenes who make this show happen every week, especially our executive producer, TJ, who's really been at the foundation of every edition of At Issue. We also want to thank all the guests that have come on to offer their insight, but most of all, we want to thank you for making us part of your Sunday mornings. We hope our time together left you more informed about your government and more willing to engage with your local community. So, for the final time, thanks for joining us on At Issue, everybody. I'm Corey Smith.
And I'm Sue O'Connell. Have a great day.